Oh dear. Welcome to the broadcast, my dear fruits. The plot thickens, doesn't it? That's all I can say. The plot thickens. If you haven't heard, the Duchess of Sussex has been clapping back. She's been clapping back royally. Oh dear. She seems to have a rather bee in her bonnet and is showing a bit of a tantrum. Or is she? I mean, to be quite honest with you, it raises far more questions than it does offer answers. But we are going to look at that in just a moment. Also, for those of you that adore Tip Jar Corner, there is a Tip Jar Corner towards the end of this broadcast. So you can skip ahead if you don't care for any of this nonsense. But first of all, happy St. George's Day, everybody. St. George was the patron saint, or is the patron saint of England. And I'd forgotten all about it, to be quite honest. I couldn't recall the date, if you ever asked me. Nobody really celebrates it here. I'm not speaking for everybody, but it's not celebrated in the same way as St. Patrick's Day, for example, or even as St. Andrew's, or what's the other one, St. David's. It's not really celebrated very much at all, except a few people getting merry here and there. But that's what it is. So happy St. George's Day, my dear. We should celebrate it more, shouldn't we? Perhaps when we have King George ascending the throne, if we get round to that, we might be able to bring it back into fashion. But here is St. George hanging from the Order of the Garter's collar, worn by Queen Elizabeth II at her coronation in 1953. And today, in celebration of St. George's Day, His Majesty has appointed 2 new companions of the Order of the Garter in the form of the Baroness Ashton of Upholland and the Lord Patten of Barnes. And there's been further gaiety and felicitations for little Prince Louis, who celebrates his 5th birthday today. And we were treated to some lovely photographs provided by the Prince and Princess of Wales of Louis in the garden at Adelaide Cottage. And these photographs weren't taken by the Princess Catherine on this occasion. They were taken by Millie Pilkington, and she did a beautiful job, didn't she? We can see Louis there in his amongst garden cuttings and taking a wheelbarrow on a nice fun journey with Mama, and wearing a very cosy Fair Isle jumper. I'm rather jealous of that. I'd quite like the grown-up version. Truly charming, truly charming. But from the charms of true royalty, I'm afraid, my dears, we must descend down to the level of the gutter snipe, because, oh dear, the plot thickens. The Duchess of Sussex, we must turn to her, my dear, because it relates to yesterday's news, this week's news, that came to us on the wings of the Daily Telegraph. As I told you in yesterday's broadcast, it was the Daily Telegraph who claimed that their sources had been whispering in their ear about this letter from Charles. And you can watch yesterday's broadcast to familiarise yourself, but I'm sure you all know about it by now. Charles had written to Meghan. Meghan responded to Charles, but nothing was ever really resolved. Anyway, it appears there's been such a hoo-ha about this, my dear. It appears that there's been a bit of a legal back and forth between various teams, and many people are saying that this has been coming from both sides. Who started writing legal letters first? I cannot tell you. What I can tell you is that as of the time of recording, which is into the afternoon of today, whenever you're watching this, the article still is existing on the Telegraph website. So it appears that they are standing by their story. And I will read out the statement that came from Ashley Hansen, who is the Global Press Secretary to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. I believe it was originally provided to Bazaar, which is the online version of Harper's Bazaar. And if you didn't know, the royal editor-at-large at Harper's is one Omid Scobie, who wrote Finding Freedom, and to refresh your memory, that is the tome that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex implied they had no involvement with. until a court case revealed the fact that they had provided notes, substantial briefings, to the authors, Omid Scobie and Carolyn Durrant. Interesting, no? Interesting. Well, the statement from this so-called Team Sussex from Ashley Hansen said, "The Duchess of Sussex still won't refer to herself as just plain old Meghan, will she? Still uses the title of the institution that she besmirches. The Duchess of Sussex is going about her life in the present." Oh, now this is too much, this statement. It is just too much. I've got to try not to get exercised. Pass me the smelling salts, dears. The Duchess of Sussex is going about her life in the present, not thinking about correspondence from 2 years ago, related to conversations from 4 years ago. Any suggestion otherwise is false and frankly ridiculous. We encourage tabloid media and various royal correspondents to stop the exhausting circus that they alone are creating. You couldn't make it up. That they alone are creating. I scarce know where to begin with that. I mean, are they gaslighting us? Are they baiting us, the rest of the world, and the media at large? Seriously, isn't their truth interesting? An interesting interpretation of the truth, no? But what this statement reveals, if you look at the wording, it seems to confirm that the 2021 correspondence indeed happened, doesn't it? Because it says she's not thinking about correspondence from 2 years ago. And they seem to confirm that the race conversation was in 2019, from 4 years ago. So they are putting their own timeline on this and seem, from this statement, if I'm not misreading it, to confirm that there was correspondence. So if there was correspondence, who did it come from? The whispers of this correspondence. Did it come from the palace? In fairness, I do not know. But what you've got to ask yourself, and what other people have been asking, is who has something to gain from the leaking of this? Which camp? Do you really think that King Charles, as he's preparing for his coronation and has 6,000 million trillion other things occupying his mind at the moment, do you think it would be at his behest, or these shady characters at the palace? And I've seen others suggesting out there that this is a bit of a repeat performance with regards to the curious case of Alison P. Davis, who wrote that article for The Cut magazine, and it is said and rumoured that Meghan was displeased by the undercurrents of unfavourable... what's that word I'm looking for? Innuendo. Is that the right word? Unfavourable undercurrents, let's just put it that way, my dear. Some passive aggression there within the high praise, if you read between the lines. That mystery never really got truly solved, but many are saying that it is a similar scenario to that after she threw Alison P. Davis under a bus, reportedly. I cannot confirm that. But they're saying that she is throwing the Telegraph and Victoria Ward under a bus because perhaps the Sussexes, either in collaboration or alone, fed or encouraged information to be fed in their direction. Now, is that likely or not? Well, initially one would think no, and I'm inclined to think no. I can't imagine why Meghan would provide information to a publication such as the Daily Telegraph, because, for one, it is the home of Camilla Tominey, who, as we know, is not a favourite of Harry's at all, who, as we know, is the journalist who scooped their relationship and broke that news in the first place. So there's a lot of vitriol for Camilla Tominey from Prince Harry. But if they, or one of their camp, were to approach a British publication, then the Daily Telegraph wouldn't be out left field. Harry himself, during the Netflix documentary, set aside the Telegraph when he was talking about the British tabloids because he said that they are not a tabloid. He made that express distinction. Because the Telegraph does have a lot more class than many of the British tabloids. In my opinion, it exists somewhere between a tabloid and a broadsheet. It's in that sort of middle area ground, but I find it to be rather reputable. I find it a very good read, and along with the Times, they are respected publications. So is it completely out of the question that they might have been approached? No, it is not. And I also notice, I've got to tell you, that their favourite magazine, or one of them, that they seem to have had no problem with in the past, the People, or rather People magazine ran the story because it was reissued by publications all over the world. When the Telegraph came out with it, well, it was re-amplified by People magazine. Yes. And it was People magazine that Meghan Sussex's friends all ran to, wasn't it? To give their insight on her relationship with her father and all this kind of thing. And seem to have been previous cheerleaders. Well, do they come under your, what is it you called it, my dear? Your tabloid exhausting circus. Roll up to the circus, my dear. Do they count as part of this circus? And if so, why do you give your tacit approval to them? And why do you give your tacit approval to the likes of Harper's? Why can't you make your own statements on your own website? What do Harper's Bazaar have that other publications don't have? Are you telling me that Harper's Bazaar, with its bizarre employment of a royal editor-at-large called Omid Scobie. Actually, I'm just being naughty. I don't actually have anything special against Omid Scobie or Carolyn Durrant. It is what it is. But my disparagement is for the Sussexes, because those journalists are not exactly casting the rest of your family in a flattering light. So if you don't like briefings that seem to run against you and you complain about that, why do you seem to feel that it's acceptable to provide briefings to publications that don't exactly flatter your kindred and your kinfolk? To me, there's a double standard at play, as usual. Because if Prince Henry is always so keen to disparage the institution for scratching the backs of editors and journalists, as he pointed out so pointedly in his tome, then why are you doing the same? Why are you doing the same? It is so beyond farcical, isn't it? And Meghan, dear, apart from the fact that it is vulgar and graceless to complain and throw a tantrum and a hissy fit in the way that you have done, my dear, it's also going to be no use expressing your impatience for this exhausting circus as if you weren't warned by the King and the royal family, and no doubt the Waleses, as if you weren't warned that all of this would escalate, that this circus that you brought about in the wake of that interview and all that mischief, you didn't heed the warnings, my dear. So it's no good thinking that you always are going to have the final say. Why do you think that your word is always final? It's like, we are doing the Oprah interview, we are telling the world how bad the royal family are, how wicked they are, and that is the end of it. They will apologise to us, they will come crawling, and that's it. If we make a statement about something, nobody else should have right to reply. If we claim that we got married the day before we did, so on, my dear. I'm sorry, you opened a conversation. You didn't open and close it. When you went on Oprah Winfrey, you opened a conversation. And it was a conversation that left us with many more questions than answers. So what do you expect the world to do? Just go shtum, and the world's media to just go shtum? No. Doesn't work that way, my dear. You brought it out into the public. You took private concerns public. As I've said before, and I will say it again, even if some of your concerns had validity, which I really doubt in the vast majority of the case, even if they did, you should have kept all of that private. There was no reason to wash those dirty undercrackers in private, my dear. You claim that the royal family never cared about your well-being, your safety, but you would be better placed at this moment and right now if you'd heeded their advice. But guess what? Why didn't you heed their advice? Because yes, you would be better off in every single way if you had heeded their advice, except which way? Financially. Think about it. Think about it. If they had heeded the royal family's advice to never complain, never explain, and to shut up, they would be better off in every way right now. Their reputation would be fine, would be wonderful. Their role, their work would be truly rewarding with a greater reach. They would be part of a family, even if it is, like most families, dysfunctional. They would be within a family, with their family growing up, knowing the rest of their family. Which ways are they now better off? Well, one, it's handy for Meghan because she wanted to be back over the other side of the pond, didn't she? So, location-wise, I suppose you could say, she never wanted to live in England for good, did she? So, she's got sunny Montecito, but the only other way is financially, isn't it? Financially. Financial freedom. That's what they managed to attain, my dear. So, in my opinion, that was part of the draw. A big part of the draw. I also want to make the point, because it's barely mentioned, that the Duchess of Sussex could have taken a sabbatical if she was that miserable while she was here working for the royal family. There's absolutely nothing. There's no contract. She's not legally obliged to do anything. And as we've heard, there are whispers, and the belief is that Her Majesty, her late Majesty herself, encouraged Meghan to continue doing whatever she wanted to, even if it was acting. There would have been no clampdown, even if in the unlikely scenario that there were some harsh words given to her with regards to what she does with her future. She has her own agency, as we've seen. And she and Harry used it to do what they did, which was vulgar enough. Well, they could have used it to just say, we need time out, or Meghan needs time out. No one was forcing her. As a subject to this kingdom and somebody who appreciates monarchy, I, before all of this drama unfolded, was very grateful to the likes of her and the likes of the Kents and the Unsungs and the Gloucesters and even the Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie for their good work and their wonderful standards that they uphold. They are a breath of fresh air in many ways. I am grateful to them for their service, and I was for Harry and Meghan's as well. Going out and doing wonderful things in Australia, enhancing our reputation abroad, fabulous. But you didn't have to do it. You didn't have to do any of it. And we see that you are a strong, capable woman. You know the power of no. So why didn't you employ it in this instance? You could have taken time out. You were not being held at gunpoint to do it. There was no pressure of that kind on you. And even if Prince Henry felt the pressure as a second son to continue doing his work, there's no insistence that you have to work in tandem as a team, even if that's what you might have preferred doing yourself. He could have continued on his royal duties. Not every couple in the world has to work together, do they? It's fairly rare that you'll find husband and wife teams working together on a daily basis, It's nice if that's what you enjoy, but most people don't need to be together at the hip all the time. So there were so many different ways out of the confines of the roles that you found yourself in. So many more constructive ways. But you chose to go on Oprah Winfrey. Go figure. So I remain curious to see how that unfolds, my dear. Anyway, let's turn to some other royaler subjects for a little while before we take a trip to Tip Jar Corner, shall we, my dear? And we're going to start with a little nicety on the subject of Scotland. Scotland is going to honour the King with a service of thanksgiving and dedication at St Giles's Cathedral in Edinburgh, just as his mother was in 1953, where she was greeted by 1,700 worshippers, and he's going to be presented with Britain's oldest crown jewels. We've spoken about the Stone of Destiny before, so I'm not going to hold forth on that right now, but that is an ancient symbol of Scotland's monarchy, and that is going to be presented at Westminster Abbey, and it's going to be a key part of this event. But during the service, His Majesty is going to be presented with the Honours of Scotland, and they are normally on display in the Crown Room at Edinburgh Castle, and they are the oldest regalia in the British Isles. Remember that lots of our original crown jewels, including original crowns, were melted down many hundreds of years ago, which is a sadness. But these are the oldest existing regalia, and the honours feature the crown of Scotland and a sword and a sceptre. And they were last used for King Charles II, so a long time ago, in 1651, the second Charles to our present third Charles, and they are to be escorted from the castle to the cathedral by a people's procession, 100 representatives from the different walks of life that you will find across Scotland. And there's rather a sweet story involving the king's love of wool and the wool industry, because he adores it. You know, he can identify and name every single breed of sheep in the world. It's one of his many talents, one of his hidden talents. But Savile Row tailors have created a mile of bespoke bunting for the celebrations, and they're going to be put up on display tomorrow. The bunting is made from sustainable wool in partnership with the King's Campaign for Wool, and he's a patron of this campaign since it was created in 2010. It's his personal initiative, the personal initiative of the monarch. So it is his true one of his many true passions. He's a long-standing champion of the benefits of wool for its natural qualities as, you know, a natural fibre, and its power of sustainability. You know, always ahead of his time, my dear. The bunting's been handmade by apprentice tailors in 17 of Britain's finest sartorial institutions. Welcome to Tip Jar Corner, everybody, and thank you most sincerely to anybody who might have thrown a few coins into my privy purse over the last, recently or at any time at all. It's very kind of you, my dears, thank you, and I add them to my funds for coffee, pastries and little trinkets from the second-hand stores, the vintage stores and charity shops. And so here I am to show you a little display and a caddy of my recent findings, some which you might have spotted in some broadcasts recently and some that you won't have done. So here we go. We're going to start with these royal blue opera gloves. And I do realise that the coloured gloves that I sometimes wear are too much. They can be too much sometimes, but to be honest with you, my dears, I'd like to add a bit of humour to an outfit here or there. You know, one can get a little bit bored wearing the same thing again and again, and sometimes I like to play and experiment with the colourways. And I'm showcasing them here on a bed of porcelain poppies, and I found that plate last year, some of you might remember, in a charity shop, and it is studded with new earrings in sapphire blue. And you know that I have a great love of colour, my dear, and one thing that always intrigues me is the pairing of colours, and how any colour, whether it's black, white or pink, the nature of it and the characteristics of it change when you place them next to another colour. So I love twinning colours, the various hues, the various shades, and then creating a palette sometimes. All that kind of thing I find mesmerising. I find it the juice of life. I find that when you throw colours together, you can elicit memories, you can evoke nostalgia and little fragments of sensory feeling. And this scheme, of course, is rather like the bunting that we've just spoken about. Red and blue, most royal, with a patriotic sort of theme to it, whether you're this side of the pond or the other side of the pond. Red, white and blue tend to be rather popular for national colours, don't they? But it's bold, and I also always enjoy the pairing of various different textures, from the sharp and the crisp to the soft and velveteen. Here is a blue rose applique to be used as a hair adorer or accessory, perhaps in place of a brooch, and it's trimmed with glitter and feathers. It's sitting next to my handmade diary there, isn't it lovely? I've always had a fondness for little pink florals, not too chintzy, but a little bit chintzy. I rather like it. And here's a necklace from the vintage fair in a selection of blues, clear and milky, and a few greens as well in there as well. Lovely. Forgive me if I've shown any of these to you before. I don't think that I have, but I always forget and I can never be bothered to go back and look. It's set in silver and the stones vary in shape and they come in 2 sizes. Gorgeous. Look at these pink lavender stones, which are set in a frame of sunbursting diamond, gold and pearl. The glorious depth of colour to the lozenge, and the effect is that of a semi-precious cushion, elevating the gems. The silky vintage scarf puts me in mind of light summer grasses, a meadowy sort of palette, pale blue earrings, play bluebells or cornflowers next to the heather of those more lavender affairs. The jewels of high summer. I adored the colourways that I created for this vignette, with the Cadbury's purple shade of these opera gloves, so satiny and so sweet, paired with this silver grey necklace that I happen to be wearing today, actually. Just peekaboo, peekaboo, which is wonderful. I always like it when they create a sort of collar effect, a collar bib effect. It's very royal, very twinkly. And this particular colourway of the purples and the grey silvers and the blacks always brings out a 90s vibe. I'm thinking of soulful black singers that dip into the dance floor R&B. Very much reminds me of R&B. It's that satiny purple next to gorgeous black skin tones. Velvety, silky, as I say, that sort of Cadbury's purple. I'm thinking of En Vogue, I'm thinking of Prince, the new power generation, I'm thinking of the glamour of the divas of that era. Wonderful. And the necklace has gems that fall into a Niagaran cascade of tears, elegant and opulent. Here is the same rose applique we saw before, but this time in a lemony sherbet and Easter chick yellow. And this orange halo brooch is warm as the harvest sun, and I couldn't resist trying out this traffic light palette of red, amber and green, just for a bit of fun. And later on, as you may have seen in a recent broadcast, I added it to this pale salmon headband to give the piece a bit of a glow up. It's amazing what you can do, my dear. I'm always speaking about how we can turn the mundane into the magical. That sort of that alchemy. I mean, case in point, my dear, this particular headband was rather plain, until I adorned it with another brooch from another charity shop. Or was it the Vintage Fair? I can't remember where I got this particular one, but it's old and reused, refashioned, repurposed, very much in keeping with the king's way of thinking. And I think it's very royal, and as I say, it transcends one. From the gutter to the stars, my dear. A bit of twinkle. It paired very well with this cheap and cheerful Saturn Effect Bolero number that I wore for you the other day. Actually, I was delighted that look. It was a different colour palette for me, not one that I usually bring together for you in the broadcast, but I loved it. Unfortunately, it didn't read that well on camera. I wasn't happy with the way that it looked on screen, but as I say, I'm here to dress up and have fun and make a few mistakes along the way. It just the bolero came across as very cheap looking, and to be honest, it was a cheap bolero, my dear. It's the dressing up box affair here in the fruit basket. That's what it is. But it all looked very bunched up and tight because of the way that I sort of am forced into sitting in this chair. I'm afraid I can't do this all the time. It wasn't especially flattering, but I loved the colours. I really did. This headband, however, is large and sumptuous. Isn't it wonderful? It's a crystal castle confection with long rectangular shards and 1 trillion crystals surrounding it like stars. Dazzling glossy pink and ruby and silvery white. And it's presented on cream under-elbow gloves. These ones, yes. I've also got some grey ones to show you as well. Some people have asked, until the last week where I wore some paler gloves, some white ones and some green ones and a blue pair, why I will always wear the black gloves, and some of you suggested that they don't always match my outfit. Well, I have to say I was always told that black gloves will go with any outfit, regardless, that black will match anything, but I can understand what you mean with some of the more lighter outfits, although Her Majesty did on occasion wear black gloves with pale clothes as well. But the main reason is simply because of the way that I sit and broadcast to you in this frame with my hands right in front of me. They can become quite distracting if they're either in different colour or indeed if they're naked. So I've just found that I find them, I don't want to have this sort of Meghan Sussex affair of the old flailing all over the place, my dear. Things like that can annoy me in videos when I see them. And I find that when I shroud them in black gloves, It just mutes them a little bit, my dear. Although, unfortunately, they disappear into the shadows here and there, don't they? That's the only thing they can. That's why sometimes I might venture into some other colours coming up, or some other shades, or some lighter shades. But in general, I just find that it's less distracting to have them in this Creatures of the Woodland affair. Well, thank you for joining me in Tip Jar Corner. That was fun, and I hope that you enjoyed the broadcast. Please enjoy what's left of the weekend and of St. George's Day. Have to raise a toast to St. George. That's a good reason, isn't it? A good excuse to have a little evening tipple wherever you are in the world. Do it, do it, do it. And I am looking forward to see what else emerges with regards to the curious case of this letter to Daddy-in-law over the next few days. Let's see if the Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, can clap back, because sometimes they do, you know. Sometimes they do. We shall see. Thank you, my dears. I'll catch up with you soon. Take care, won't you, my dear, and channel the royal spirit.